In the last 5 years, I've taught thousands of people how to become better readers and to get the most out of the books that they do end up reading. And in that time, I've noticed that a majority of them run up against one or more of the following 7 problems. And so here in this video, I want to solve all of those problems for you. Now, obviously, in such a short video, I'm not going to be able to go deep into many of these things, and I certainly won't pretend that this is every single thing you need to know. But right here is the 80-20. You've probably heard of the 80-20 rule, and basically all it is that 20% of the things that you do usually lead to 80% of the results, and this applies in several different fields. So for example, 20% of authors sell 80% of the books, and then 80% of the authors sell the remaining 20% of the book. Stuff like that. It appears everywhere. And so here, with respect to reading, these 20% of the things that you could do, that you could focus on, are going to give you the majority of your results. So if you focus on these things that we're going to be talking about today, the answers and solutions to these 7 problems, that's going to immediately put you into the top 1% of readers, basically. And so it's really going to help you a lot. Now, I won't do too much in the way of an introduction, but just to establish some credibility for people who are maybe seeing me for the very first time. My name is Matt Karamazov. This is my YouTube channel, and over the last 8 years, I've read and taken notes on more than 1,000 books. So I've got thousands and thousands of pages of notes on these 1,000+ books. At the moment that I'm recording, I'm at 1,022. I mean, this is my thing. Like, reading is the thing that I do, and I've gotten very good at it over a sustained period of time. So it's not unreasonable to estimate that I've spent 10,000 hours reading, which is just insane. But I fought for that time. And no matter where your reading level is right now, it's a skill that you can improve on, that you can get better at over time. And I've done that. I've spent the time, I've put in the work, and I know what works, what doesn't, what you should look out for, what other people have had problems with, and how they and I have solved them. And so in this short-ish video, I want to solve the 7 biggest problems that most people have with reading. And if you want me to go deeper into a lot of these things, because I'm not going to spend too much time on each one, I want to keep this video pretty short, but if you would like me to do a more detailed video on any of these points, just put a comment down below, ask me, and there's a link down below in the description where you can sign up with your email, and I will send you my best book recommendations every week. Basically, if you ever want to ask me a question personally, all you have to do is respond or reply to one of those emails. It goes directly back to me. So if you have any questions whatsoever about reading or about anything, just email me, and if I don't respond in a few days, just send it again. I get a lot of email, so maybe I haven't gotten to you yet. Don't worry about it. Okay, so with that, we're going to start right now. This is the first major problem that a lot of people have with reading, and the first is no time with which to do it. And so for this problem, I've got 8 different solutions. The very first thing you have to do is shift your priorities, because like when you can't breathe, the only thing that you can think about is taking that next breath. Like that's it. Like that is your priority. I mean, you have to want to read as badly as you want to breathe. You have to want to read more than you want to watch YouTube videos or Netflix or waste time whatsoever just doing anything. If you want to read more than you want to do anything else, when you make that priority shift, you're going to get more reading done. And the second thing, I told you we were going pretty quickly, is you have to schedule your reading into your day. If it's not in your schedule, it's almost like it doesn't exist. So basically what you want to do, and this is what I do with the gym, with everything like that, everything that I want to make a priority, I schedule it first, and then I schedule everything else around it. So basically, that's the thing that gets done. It's in my schedule. It's an appointment with myself that I keep, and like I'm very serious about my commitment to keeping that in my schedule and doing it, and everything else, like if it gets done, whatever. Like you have to breathe. And if you don't do something else, that's okay. But as long as you're breathing, as long as you're reading. The next thing is more of a simple mindset shift, and this is important to understand too. Everyone has the same 24 hours in a day. There's no, like even the people who read 200, 250 books a year, they don't have any extra, like magical extra time that they're given. They make do with the 24 hours that we're all given each day. Now, there are people with no like outside commitments whatsoever. I mean, they don't have kids, they don't have demanding jobs, they don't have all of these very real pressures that a lot of people do have. But just realize that there are 24 hours, and you have to just every single day make the most of them. And if reading is a priority for you, if reading is one of the ways that you make the most out of your day, then you can do it. You have the same 24 hours as everyone else. You don't have less than anyone else. The next thing to understand is that time management really doesn't work. Time is unmanageable. What you can do instead, though, is manage your focus and your attention. Basically, you have to realize where your attention is going, because over the course of your entire life, what you pay attention to becomes your life. That's very, very, very important to understand. Like, I used 3 varies. Like, that's very important to understand. Next, you have to manage your energy levels, like how tired you are, how alive you are, your vitality, and just like the energy that you can bring to each day, and to really get the most out of every single day that you have to be alive and to read these fantastic books. Because if your energy is constantly low and you're sort of dragging yourself through the day, you're not going to read. And especially at the end of the day, I mean, if you haven't done any reading throughout the entire day, and you get to the end and you finally have like a spare half hour or 10 minutes with which to read, but you've spent the entire day just crashing and sort of dragging yourself through it, you're not going to get any reading done, and that would be just a waste. You also have to aggressively take back your time. Now, I don't mean impolitely or rudely. I mean, you can be polite about this, you can be a nice person, but really take a stand and set some boundaries with respect to your time, and where you will allow your focus to go, and the commitments that you make and stuff like that. If you say yes to a whole bunch of different people for things that you don't really care about, when you actually want to read more than you want to go do those things, then you're just not going to get as much reading done as you could. So you have to, no one else is going to give you time. Everyone wants more of your attention, more of your time. I want your attention. I want you to watch this video to the end. You know what I mean? So everyone is constantly asking things of you or from you, and you have to sort of weigh that against your reading time. Will saying yes to this person mean that I can read fewer books this month, and is that a trade-off that I'm willing to make? So and don't be shy about setting these sort of boundaries. I mean, your life is your life. No one is going to give you more time. Everyone is trying to make you pay attention to their priorities. So you have to, again, don't be a jerk about it, but be insistent. Be aggressive about it. Say, I can't do it. I'm sorry, I can't go. I won't be there. And it's very important to understand that. Next, I want to mention that the best way to manage your time, as much as that can be done, is to see where it's going now. So my advice for this, and I don't do this every single day, but it's useful to do this, once every so often. So take, one specific day, that's a routine day for you, a normal day for you, and as you go through the entire day, write out exactly how you spend your time during that day. And the level of resolution can change. Some people manage every 5 minutes of they'll go 5 minutes and then write down what they did in that last 5 minutes. I think that's a little bit excessive, but hey, I mean, you can do that if you want to. And then at the end of that time period, you can look back and say, hey, I spent 4 hours today eating, when I could have maybe condensed that into an hour and a half. Did I really have to take the long way home from work? Maybe I could go home, leave work, later when there's less traffic, or do something. Realize where your time's going now, and so you can make adjustments. And the last solution to not having time to read is the realization that every single 15-minute period adds up over time, and it adds up really quickly. Think back to, maybe even today, you've wasted 15 minutes somewhere today. I have. I'll tell you, from the time that I woke up this morning to the time that I'm recording this, I've wasted 15 minutes somewhere. We all do it. But at the very same time, you should realize how easy it is and sort of be conscious of that so you can do it less. For example, I mean, it's not that hard to waste 15 minutes here and there, and it's not that hard to do that 4 times a day. So if you do that 4 times a day, if you waste an hour every single day, that's 365 hours a year, if my math serves me correctly. And if it takes you 10 hours to read a book, that's 37 books that you could be reading, but you didn't. And it's only because you wasted these 15 minutes here and there that you easily could have used better, that you could have used to read. Take back your 15 minutes here and there, and you'll find an hour each day with which to read. We're moving on now to the next problem, and it's distraction. A lot of people are just too distracted to read. Their attention is going off in different places, in different directions, and they just can't focus on reading. So how do you combat that and get more reading done? So the very first thing that I would do, and this is like, we were talking earlier about the 80-20. This is like the 1% of things that you could do that lead to like 99% of your results. Basically, just leave your phone on silent in the other room. Honestly, like, it's almost as simple as that. Eliminate distractions as much as possible. And like the biggest distraction that most people have in their entire lives is that cell phone that's in their pocket or like next to them or like attached to their head. That's just like going off all the time with these like bells and whistles and like everyone trying to get your attention, like pull your attention away from reading, away from the priorities you've set for yourself. So like the biggest thing that you can do is just to leave your phone on silent in the other room. And the next thing to do is pretty much a don't do, actually. And it's the idea that, we want to concentrate, to become better at concentrating, but we don't practice concentration, we practice distraction. Every time you allow yourself to become distracted by something, you're getting better at being distractible. And conversely, every time you concentrate on something, every time you practice your concentration, you get better at concentrating. And actually reading itself is fantastic for this. I mentioned earlier how I spent, 10,000 hours reading. That has improved my concentration immeasurably because 10,000 times I've practiced the skill of concentration. And if you can practice that over and over again over time, you're just going to get better and better at it. And the next solution to eliminating distraction is to practice meditation. But if you don't want to actually take up a meditation practice, like, it's not for everybody. I'm not saying that everybody has to do it. I enjoy the time just like sitting doing nothing, like with my eyes closed, just breathing, doing nothing, thinking of nothing. It's very relaxing. It's just the thing that I do. But if you don't want to do that for whatever reason, you don't have to, and you can just use reading as your meditation, because all meditation really is noticing when your attention is wandering and then bringing it back. So basically, you can read, and when you notice your focus being drawn somewhere else, you bring your focus back to the book that you're reading, and you do that over and over and over again, which is basically what meditation is, except for without the book. What you're bringing yourself back to is your breath or something that you're focusing on, instead of a book. So meditation can be reading. Reading can be meditation, and it helps so much in practicing concentration rather than practicing distraction. This next tip is a little bit more aggressive. I don't want to alienate anyone. There's nothing wrong with being average, but you can also look at it as sort of a pride thing. Do you really want to be like everyone else? Like, everybody has these problems with reading. Like, they're distracted all the time. I mean, so many people are like 2 paychecks away from broke. Everyone's like, I don't want to say like it's such a bad thing to be overweight, but if you're like, a lot of people are overweight and they don't want to be. Like, if you're fine with it, that's cool. But if the average is being in worse shape than you want to be, like financially, physically, everything. What I'm saying basically is that many people don't have a dedicated reading habit, and it's pretty much like a causal factor in their lives falling apart, like them not being where they want to be. They're not as happy as they could be, not as fulfilled as they could be, not as successful or just as resilient or knowledgeable or anything that they want to be. And that's everybody. There's so much competition for average, but there's almost no competition for excellent. If you really want to be excellent, if you want to rise above the average, you want to enter like the 1% of anything, it's a lot easier than just staying like everyone else, staying average. So to eliminate distractions, realize that everyone else is distracted and not living up to what they could be living up to, not reaching their full ability. And do you really want to be like them? My guess is that no, you don't want to be like that. So take some pride in yourself and what you're doing, and just put more into it, and just realize that you don't have to be like everyone else. Again, aggressive tip, but it totally works. And then dialing it back a little bit, I just want to say a little bit more about your environment in which you read. You want to have as few distractions there as possible, obviously. What I find help, like if you can't get everyone else out of the room, if you can't turn off like TV somewhere else, because I've been places, doctors' waiting rooms and places like that where there's stuff going on, there's noise and everything that I can't directly control. But as much as you can, you want to control your environment, make it as comfortable and quiet as possible, just to get the most out of what you're reading. Just dedicate the most focus as you can, and even just like reading with like instrumental music, and not too loud so that you're listening to the music instead of reading, but just sort of block out the ambient noise and just really be there. And so as much as possible, like, environment shapes how distracted you are to a significant extent. And there's something to be said for not being distractible, but then there's also just changing your environment to make it a lot easier to focus. And if you focus on those two things, make yourself better at concentrating and remove distractions, then you're just going to be so much further ahead. And the third problem that a lot of people have is that they simply don't have confidence in their reading ability or their ability to learn to read. And the very first solution to that is realize that, the pretty much the last time that anyone taught you how to read, like taught you any reading skills whatsoever, was in grade school. You've had no formal education in this. No one, like, after you graduate or even before then, like, no one is teaching you these skills on how to become a better reader. Don't think of yourself as a bad reader. You're just an untrained reader. Like, you just haven't learned yet. It's not that you can't do it. It's just you haven't, watched a video like this yet, or whatever that is. So just realize that you're teachable. You can learn these skills. You can get better at it over time. And where you are right now doesn't have to be where you end up. Which leads me into my next point, which is that most people are nowhere near their actual potential. They have no idea what their best is. They can't even see what their best looks like. And they can't see it because they haven't started off in that direction. And right now, you're taking steps forward to becoming a better reader and to get the most out of your reading and, like, the books that you choose to read. And, like, that is a significant step. You're taking action in order to learn and get better, and you're moving closer to that potential. And once you start moving towards it, you realize how much you were selling yourself short before, and how little credit you were actually giving yourself, and how much room there is to grow and improve. And you're going to start seeing this. It's going to be a very exciting time in your life. You're going to become so much better at reading, and just realize that, where you are now, it doesn't have to be where you end up. Like I said. Which again leads me into my next point, which is that progress is incredibly motivating, and it will be for you as well. So once you realize that you can actually do these things, you're gonna wonder what else you can do. Like, this happens everywhere. I mean, like, I experienced the same thing with going to the gym. Once I started making progress in the gym, I got really, really motivated to basically see where I could go, like how far that I could take my physique, and like what I could achieve. You get to the top of one mountain, and then you sort of ask yourself, what else can I climb? Where is the next mountain? And again, like, you have no idea what your potential, like what your best actually is. But once you set out in that direction and you start making this progress, it's a virtuous cycle. You make some progress, you get motivated, and then you make more progress, and it just keeps going up and up and up. And we don't know the upper limit to that. You don't know where you'll end up. And I find that incredibly exciting. And we're going to talk about that at the end of the video as well. And by the way, if you're finding these tips helpful, definitely like the video. And if you want to come back for more of these videos and book reviews, definitely just subscribe to the channel. For every new subscriber, I donate $1 to the children's charity First Book. And they help kids learn to read, and they provide them with books and all of that. I love donating to them and basically making you a better reader, and just making kids better readers, and making books a big part of their lives. And which actually leads me into this next thing. You want to have people around you who support you and who are doing the same things. You want to be around a community of readers and people who are going to be supportive of what you're doing and aren't going to try and tear you down. And some people are lucky to have supportive people like that already, but if you don't have that, you have to go find them, because they're definitely out there. They're readers that will support your reading goals, and it's so important to find those people. So ditch the people who are trying to drag you down, and really try to associate with people who are going to lift you up higher, because there are people out there that want to see you succeed, like myself, and who are going to just give you help and support, and they're going to make your life better in so many ways, not just reading. So whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish, surround yourself with people who are going in that same direction and who want the best for you. And like, that is so useful, like so helpful in everything that you could possibly do, not just reading. So that is that. And the next problem that a lot of people have is that they're simply slow readers. And so for the very first solution to that is not setting unrealistic expectations. I want to get that out of the way right up front, because there's a book called Reading in the Brain by Stanislas Dehaene. And what he says, like, there are so many contrary claims, and like we'll talk about the charlatans out there who claim these ridiculous words per minute that they can read. Basically, words per minute, self-explanatory. It's how many words you can read per minute. Anyway, so this guy, he's a scientist. He, peer-reviewed studies. Like, it's his career to study like the optic. Like he knows he knows what he's talking about. And basically, what he says is that anyone who claims, like any claims of reading speeds over 1,000 words per minute should be, quote, viewed with suspicion. So just keep that in mind. If anyone tells you that they can read like 5,000 words per minute, maybe they can skim that fast, but like if you're actually trying to read and remember, like retain what you're actually reading, 1,000 words per minute is like ridiculously good, and like maybe not even possible. So like think of that as like the upper limit, and just like don't set unrealistic expectations. So for example, anywhere from like 200 words per minute to 500 is really, really, really good. So 200, no shame in that whatsoever. And we'll talk about this coming up, but you should read at different things at different speeds. So sometimes you want to read that slow, and then if it's, again, we'll talk about this later, but some people read 500 words per minute, and that's like insanely fast. Myself, I'm only at like 300, usually maybe 350, which again is really, really, really good. But at the same time, just spend more time reading. Like, that's, instead of trying to buy this guy's course for like $500 and he'll show you how to read 28,000 words per minute, just spend more time reading at 200 words per minute, and you're going to do a lot better than that guy ever will. And this next tip is more of a confidence thing, but you should test your reading speed right now and see where it actually is, because it might be higher than you thought it was. So there are a number of different ways you can test your reading speed online. I'll put some links down below in the description. But just test your reading speed right now, and test it a few times, just to get sort of like a range. Maybe you're really tired when you tested it once and you got like 100 words per minute, but you're actually around like 225. Just test it when you're like super awake. Maybe like that gives you just get like an average and see kind of where you're at, because I think you might actually be doing better than you think you are. Some people, I mean, if you have these unrealistic expectations and you test yourself and you get 250 words per minute, and then you think, man, I'm only at 250, but I saw this one guy claiming to read 14,000, I must be an idiot. No, you're not. That guy is just selling snake oil. So anyway, that's what I have to say about that. But now, a really important tip on how to read faster, and this will take more time, but it's definitely something you want to work up to, and that's basically just knowing more words. Because if you think about it, like every time you're reading something and you come across a word that you don't know, and you can't figure out the context or figure out the meaning of the word based on context, like the words around it, it's going to slow you down significantly. So if you are constantly running into words that you don't know, that you have no idea what they mean, and you have to go back to the dictionary or just sort of skip ahead and you're kind of lost, that's going to slow you down. It's going to significantly reduce your comprehension and your retention and all that. So as much as possible, just learn more words so that when you come up against them again, you know what that means and you can just keep going. And so for myself, I mean, I spent 10,000 hours reading. I know lots of words. So right now I'm a lot faster than I used to be, because I've seen those words over and over and over again over time, and just over time I've gotten better and faster. So that, again, it's going to happen over a longer period of time, but just know that once you know more words, you're going to read faster. And next I want to talk about regression, also called backtracking, which is basically when you read again words or paragraphs that you've already read. And so as much as possible, you want to eliminate that. And it's fairly simple to do. Sometimes what I do is read with like either like my hand or even like a slip of paper or something, and cover up the words that you've already read, so you're not tempted to go back. And sometimes it's not because you didn't understand what you just read and you have to go back, because that's a legitimate reason for backtracking. Like if you didn't understand what you just read, you might have to read it again. I do that all the time, especially for more complicated books. There's no shame in that. That's actually what you should do. If you don't get it, just read it again and again. So like that's what you do. But if you're doing it unintentionally, which is what a lot of people do, then that can be a really good strategy. So cover up what you've just read, or read with a pacer, which is basically just using a pen or something, or your finger, and sort of move your eyes along with it. Just never, don't stop, just keep going. That helps a lot. Next tip is to partially eliminate subvocalization, which is basically saying the words in your head as you read. Now, some subvocalization is good. So especially with more complicated material, you're going to want to do a little bit of it. You want to say those words in your head a little bit. It does help with retention and comprehension and all that. But a lot of people, read every word in their head like this, and you can imagine how much that slows you down. So as much as possible, just don't do that. Listening to music at the same time as you're reading helps. Not music with words, but like classical music or like instrument, like anything like that. There's some great focus music on YouTube. I mean, you just do a YouTube search on that. But I've got tons of tracks like that. They're like 3-hour tracks of just like instrumental, like focus music. It's amazing. So do that, or like some people chew gum or like stuff like that to eliminate that talking in your head. The next tip here has to do with eye fixations, which is basically every time you move your eyes across a page. So you want to do this as quickly as possible, and every eye fixation is called a saccade. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly actually, but it's called a saccade, and so you want to increase the number and speed of those saccades and just more eye fixations quicker. And the idea here is that your brain can process more than you think it can. So it can handle more of these fixations, but what we do is we sell ourselves short in so many ways, and this is one of them. We reduce the number of our fixations and their speed at which we move our eyes across the page, and we slow our own reading speed down when we can actually handle much more, especially if you're not backtracking or saying all the words in your head. You can go much faster. There's a Simpsons episode where Bart takes this focus drug called Focusin, and he says, it turns him crazy, and he says, most people use 10% of their brains. I am now one of them. So you want to be one of those people who uses 10% of their brains. The next tip here is pretty obvious, but it's very important, and that's just to take breaks. If you're reading for 2 hours straight, your reading speed is going to decline significantly in the second half of your reading, or even earlier than that. So as much as possible, you want to be fresh when you're reading, and if you've been reading for a long time straight, or you're reading when you don't have a whole lot of energy, then you're just going to be a slower reader. That's just what happens. So as much as you can, again, manage your energy and your focus, and take breaks when you're reading, and if you want to speed up, so at the end of a chapter, whatever, or read 50 pages or even 10 pages and stand up and do something, and drink a glass of water, think about something else, check Instagram, I don't care. Just take more breaks, and that'll help. The next tip is one that I alluded to earlier, and it's just that you don't want to read everything at the same speed. So, there could be a novel, like James Patterson novel, or something that's enjoyable that you don't have to think too much about. You're going to read that faster than you're going to read a science textbook or a really in-depth biography or something like that. Don't expect to read everything at the same speed. So if you read everything at 300 words per minute, you're going to miss some things, basically. So just don't do that. Now, before we move on, I have to mention speed reading, because it leads so many people astray. For one thing, we started off this problem with unrealistic expectations. So you've seen these people that claim to read 30,000 words a minute, something stupid like that. There's this one guy, I don't want to mention his name because he seems like a nice guy. He and I would get along great. We both love to read. But this guy, he was on a major television network. It's how do you even do this? So he was on air, and they're man, this guy can read 30,000 words per minute. He's going to do it live on air. So they gave him this medical legislation bill it was like an American like medical bill, and he's like, all right, I'm going to read this in 30 seconds or something, and the guy was wearing a headband. He was wearing a headband. Are you kidding me? So he goes through and he's just like ripping pages. And he's like reading it, he's sweating as he's like swiping these pages off, and he's just like, it's all theatrical and stuff. And he gets to the end and they're like, hey, that was really impressive. What did you think of the bill? And he's like, well, it's it's gonna be hard to implement. I mean, there's a lot of parts to this. A lot of people are going to be satisfied with it. Some people are going to be disappointed. But all in all, I think it will help. It's just like, I can't even. So like, it's like I don't want to trash this guy because he seems like a nice dude, but just don't, like, people will see that and think that 30,000 words a minute is possible, and that you can read like some complicated piece of legislation in like a minute, and like you just can't. So like, yes, you can read faster, you can learn how to improve your reading speed. The things that we've just talked about are going to really help you. But at the same time, like, it all comes back to having realistic expectations. So anywhere from like 200 to 500 words per minute, something that you can definitely achieve and should shoot for. And that's pretty much all I have to say about that. The next problem that I'm going to solve for you guys has to do with choosing what to read. And that really comes down to two separate problems. One of them is impossible to solve. I haven't solved it yet, and it's really the problem of having so many fantastic books to read. You just want to read all of them like right now, immediately. And I'm still sort of operating under the delusion that someday I'll be able to do that someday I will finally have read everything. It won't happen. Like, it's like I'll be disillusioned at some point. I'm still sort of persisting though. That's actually, pretty much how aneurysms happen, I think. You just get so overwhelmed at like the length of your TBR list, your to be read list, and you just can't, like, you just can't stop thinking about all of these fantastic books that are out there that you can be reading like right now, immediately, and they're all sort of crowding in on you, and then just something snaps in your head and like they find you dead in your bathtub. I'm pretty sure that's how it happens. So that problem is insoluble. I'm not going to try and solve that for you guys because I haven't solved it. I mean, if you know how, hit me up. But the problem that I can help you solve is to choose what to read initially and sort of find a book to read. Because a lot of people will say that they can't find anything to read, which is staggering to me, but it's a problem that other people have, and I have, several solutions. For the very first thing that I would say is, if you're deciding, like, trying to find a book that you want to read, think of a problem that you have in your life right now and go find a book that will help you address that problem. Will Smith, I always reference one of like my favorite speeches that he ever gave, and I don't even know the context. It was a speech to children. Maybe it was like a children's TV award or something. Anyway, Will Smith is accepting this award, and he's like, and he tells the kids in the audience that there are two keys to life, running and reading. And I won't break down the whole speech, but what he says is that every single problem that you have in your entire life, there's someone else out there somewhere who has faced that same problem or a similar problem. They've solved it, they've tackled it, and they've written about it in a book that you can read and apply what they've learned to that similar problem that you're having. Like, there are no new problems in the world, and like, everything is figure outable. You can find solutions and answers to any problem that you have, and the answers can usually be found in the best books. So that's certainly a very good starting point for deciding what to read next. Just pick anything that you're having problems with, or that you want to like improve in your life, and go find a book that will solve that problem for you, and then it sort of starts you on the way. You read that book and it'll offer solutions, and then you implement those solutions. Your life gets a little bit better. You'll run into new problems, better problems to solve, because you're finished solving this initial problem, and then you're just getting better and better, and you sort of move along in that direction. And then besides problems, you can go the opposite way and just think about what excites you, what you're curious about, what you're really, really interested in, and guaranteed there is a book probably thousands about that. Everybody is interested in something. It could be like even like a television show that you watch. Maybe one of the actors wrote a memoir. Like if you enjoy that show, maybe you wanted to learn a little bit more about this person. Any sort of skill or sport or activity. There are obviously how-to books and stuff like that. Histories and biographies of the people who are involved in that thing. Basically, just pick something that you enjoy watching or talking about, and there is a book about that subject, and usually very great books. So that's definitely another place to start. And then I'll also give you some of my resources that I go to quite often to find more book recommendations. The first that I would say, and this woman has been spectacular for giving me, like I've received hundreds of excellent book recommendations. Her name is Maria Popova. She runs a website called Brain Pickings, and she's been doing it for I don't even know how long, early 2000s, maybe like a long time. I once spent an entire afternoon just perusing her virtual bookshelf, and I picked up hundreds of book recommendations that I've either read since or are still on my list to go. Like I am such a big fan of her. And the next is Ryan Holiday. He has a very extensive reading list on his website as well, and his email is very popular. He sends out a monthly book recommendation email. I get those emails as well. It's one of the best things that ever appears in my inbox. I really can't say enough good things about it. And then also Goodreads. It is just one of the best resources for finding great books. So Goodreads has millions and millions of people every month going to the site and offering their book recommendations and writing reviews. And basically, there are lists and top book lists and recommendations. Like you're gonna find something on there, and it's just one of the best resources. And then one of the next strategies that I have for you is to start more books and quit more books as well. So don't think that, just because you started reading something that you have to finish, and that you can't just, like, there's no prize for finishing a book that you hate or are not enjoying. Nobody cares, for one. Nobody's going to find out. Nobody's going to know that you stopped reading this book. And if you're not interested in it, and it doesn't even matter what it is. It could be like an objectively fantastic book, but if you're just not into it, don't worry about it. The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho is one of my favorite books of all time. I know people who hated that book, who just didn't like it whatsoever. It sold 100+ million copies or something stupid like that. So literally more than 100 million people love this book, but some people don't. And that's just the nature of reading. There's no book that everyone is going to love, and if you're not enjoying something, just quit it. And there's a fallacy involved in this. It's called the sunk cost fallacy, and it appears more so in business. But basically, the idea is that once you put time or money or effort into something, you have to sort of, the fallacy is that you have to sort of see it through to the end. And whereas, in reality, you'd be much better served by just cutting your losses and moving on. And it's the sunk cost. You've already sunk that effort and that money in, so you think that you have to finish it, or else the first 5 hours or the first $10,000 or all that effort you put in the beginning will be wasted if you don't see it through. But actually, what is actually true about that is that, maybe, sure, you wasted the first 3 hours reading this book that you're not enjoying. So it took you 3 hours to discover that this is not the book for you. If you decide instead to spend another 3 hours and finish this book that you hate, that is a waste of 3 extra hours that you don't have to waste. You can cut your losses and move on. So start more books and quit more books. And if it's not speaking to you, if it's not solving the problem that you have, or if it's not speaking to your curiosity, just move on. And there's no shame in that. Nobody will care. Like I said, I'm not going to judge you for it. Just move on. And that's one of the best things that you can do. And the last thing that I have for you is my own reading list, my own book recommendations. I send them out all the time. You may already be on my email list, but if you're not, you can sign up in the link below in the description. Every week I send 5 of the best books. I usually mention some others in there as well. So every single week you'll get more book recommendations directly from me, and then you've got my whole reading list and all of that. I'm always good for book recommendations. I love sort of matchmaking, setting up the perfect book for the perfect person at the perfect time. So let me do that for you if you would like. But that is those things. Like if you take those considerations into account, like you're gonna find something to read, and you're not gonna waste so much time reading books that you're not enjoying, and you're not getting anything out of them. They're not solving your problems and just making your life better, which is what books should do. So we're gonna move on now to remembering. So a lot of people have a lot of problems with retention, remembering, and like comprehension and stuff like that. So again, there are like I could talk about this for hours, but this is like the 80-20. Like I explained in the beginning, like these are the things that you should probably focus on if you want to remember more of what you read. Now, the first thing that I have for you here is the importance of reading things that are actually interesting to you rather than boring to you. And that's obvious, of course, but there's a reason for it. And the reason is that boredom is a very low activation state or emotion. So you can think of it this way. Think of the spectrum from boredom at the very bottom to really excited, like fascinated at the top. So if boredom is a 0 on the scale and fascination is a 10, you can measure the book that you're reading on that scale of whether it completely bores you to tears or really fascinates you to no end, and sort of put it somewhere on that scale. Now, whatever that number is, multiply that by whatever you choose to read, and that's pretty much what you're going to get out of it. Of course, these are not, real exact numbers, but the idea here, the core concept is really, really important. If something is relevant to you, and if you find it really, really fascinating and just interesting to no end, you can't stop thinking about it, you're going to remember it, as opposed to something that you were forced to read and that you just hated reading the whole time. You're not going to remember any of that stuff because it has no relevance to you. Like, you're never going to use it ever again. You didn't care about it the first time. You weren't engaged while you were reading it, and you're just not going to remember. And this has been true for me for my entire life. I mean, I remember some courses in high school even and university that, I still remember good chunks of that course and like being, in that classroom learning because I was so excited about what I was learning and so interested. And then others, it's a complete blank. So if you can find a book that does that for you, you're going to remember so much of what you read in that book. And then another great thing you can do, and this is one of the best things that I've ever done, was take notes on every single book that I've ever read. Now, at the time of this recording, I've done that for 1,022 books. I've taken detailed notes. Like, I have thousands and thousands of pages of notes on all of those books. They're actually all on my Patreon, not a sales pitch. But anyways, that was one of the best things that I've ever done because I have this repository of notes and summaries and just things that I never want to forget ever. And I can just instantly go back to my notes anytime that I want and review and revisit some of these things. And if you need to have that. Highlighting some books is fine. Some people can do that, but I wouldn't recommend it. I find just you want it on your computers, and so you can find it much more easily, because if you give away that book that you highlighted, or you lose it somewhere, you move, the moving company misplaces one of your boxes, your notes are gone forever. But if they're backed up online, you have them, right? So highly recommend that, and it will come into play in some of the other tips here for remembering more of what you read. But definitely, it's one of the smartest things that I've ever accidentally done was take notes on everything that I've ever read. So then another thing that's going to help you remember more is something called spaced repetition, and that's really what you're going to use your notes for. And spaced repetition is basically just reviewing your notes again over time. And so basically, when you take notes on something, say you finish a book in the morning, and spaced repetition would be, and I do this myself. I have an entire calendar here where I set this out. So I finish a book, and say you finish it in the morning. In the evening, review your notes again that you took from that book, and then review your notes again the next morning, and then a week from then, and then a month from then, 6 months from then, and a year from that time. So just keep going over them over time and revisiting them, and sort of it's spaced repetition. I mean, you get the idea. It is one of the most powerful learning and remembering strategies that you can do. It's right up there with forced recall, which is another really, really important one. And so forced recall is basically you take your notes and you revisit them again. Note taking is so incredibly important for remembering. But what you're doing here is testing yourself basically before you look at your notes. So it's very easy once you look at your notes to think or believe that you know it just because you recognize it. So you read something, you read over your notes, and you recognize it. So it gives you the illusion that you've learned something, that you remember it, but really you haven't. You're recognizing it. What forced recall forces you to do is see if you actually know it, because if you're not looking at your notes and you can call to mind the concepts and ideas and quotes and things that you've been learning, then you can say that you've really learned it, you've remembered it. But if you're just sort of cheating, just reading over your notes, again, it's giving you the illusion of learning without any learning having actually taken place. So you want to practice both spaced repetition and forced recall. So two more things here for you with respect to remembering what you read. So the second last thing here is primacy and recency. So those two words basically mean, we remember what we read first and the last thing that we read. So primacy and recency. So what you want to do is create more primacy and more recency, and you do that by taking breaks and splitting up your reading. So basically how comprehension and memory works is we remember, like at the very beginning, when you open up your book, the things that you read first are going to stick out in your mind. You're going to remember those things better. And then at the end, the last thing that you read is also going to stick out in your mind, but there's a dip in the middle where your comprehension or your retention goes down. So what you want to do is take breaks so you create more primacy and recency. So for example, if you're reading for 2 hours, at the very beginning of those 2 hours, you've got your primacy working, and the very end, you've got recency. But that whole middle space, you're experiencing that dip where you're not going to recall as much information. However, if you split it up into 2 separate hours, then you've got primacy, recency, and then primacy, recency again. So you're just creating more and sort of eliminating or bringing up that dip a little bit, so it's not so much of a crash in comprehension. And so the final thing that I have to say before we move on to the final problem here is that the best way to learn something is to teach it to someone else. And that's basically what I'm doing here in this video and on all of the videos on my channel. Basically, what I'm doing is I'm teaching other people what's contained in these great books. But in order to do that, I have to sort of form a video script. I have to engage with these ideas myself, sort of mold it into something that other people are going to be able to understand, and I have to make sure that I understand it myself in order to transmit it to you. So what you're doing when you teach someone else is you're making sure that you understand it first, and then you're putting it in a way that someone else can understand, and just the very process of doing that will help you remember more and increase your comprehension and retention and all of that. So basically, whatever it is that you want to learn, teach it to someone else, and you're going to solidify your own learning. Whether that is writing about it on your own website or something, or making YouTube videos about something that you've just learned. That is one of the best things that you can do. And like they say, when you teach something, you get to learn it twice, and that's just so incredibly true. And so now we're finally at the end here, the final problem that I want to talk to you about and solve for you guys. And I want to thank you for sticking around this long, because even this is sort of longer than I originally intended to go on for, because I got going, I sort of got on a roll with some of these things. I thought of other things that I wanted to include and tell you that you really should know, or I wanted you to know in order to become like the best possible reader. So hit the like button if this is helping you at all. Since you're still here, I'd imagine that it's helping quite a bit. And hitting the like button actually does help me, and helps tell YouTube basically that this video is a good one that people are enjoying, and the YouTube algorithm will show it to more people. So definitely do that if you're enjoying this and getting a lot out of it. So the final problem here is not so much a problem. I mean, it is a problem. I guess I'll say that it's the problem of not seeing the massive opportunity that reading itself presents. Because with reading, a lot of the biggest changes are going to be happening inside you, and other people may not even notice like a change in you, but you will definitely notice. But these changes are mostly internal, and the biggest changes, the biggest gains in motivation and sort of just aliveness and just making your life better in so many ways are going to build up, and they're going to compound over time. So the biggest changes in your life are yet to come, and those changes, they start small at first, and so some people, or a lot of people, miss them. Like, they don't see the massive opportunity that is just waiting for them. It's just sitting right as far away from them as their local library, or even like their smartphones. Like, the opportunity is like right there, and all it takes is to read like one fantastic book. Like, in the time that it takes you to read one sentence, like literally one sentence, your life can be completely and just totally transformed. Like, it's night and day. But you have to sort of put yourself in the way of those opportunities. And so this final problem, if you will, the problem of not seeing these opportunities, you have to get over it, because it's going to make so much more possible for you. Speaking of which, I want to tell you about something amazing, and it's called the adjacent possible, which is originally a term from biology, but we're going to use it here in the context of reading. And like, the best way to explain it is to think of a giant mansion, basically a big house that you've never been inside before, and you're in the first room. And of course, the first room stands for the first book that you're reading. So once you're at this first book, you're going to read this first book, and you're going to be introduced to big ideas that have a potentially transformative impact on your life, potential for you to change and grow and expand yourself, right? So you think of those as doors. But if you, like, before you entered that first room, like the very first room in that house, you didn't know that those doors were even in there. So you enter that first room, and then you figure out that there are more rooms behind, that first room that you entered. And that keeps going. And you have no idea how big this house is, where it leads to. Like, you have no idea. You just keep opening doors and going into rooms, opening books and going into ideas, and it all connects and compounds, and it just expands over time until you've discovered this mansion for yourself, and it's like inside your own mind. And I think that's amazing. It's one of the coolest things that I've ever thought about or heard of, and hopefully, I'm sort of transmitting some of this excitement to you, and you sort of understand what I'm talking about here. And you'll definitely understand once you start reading, once you enter that first room. And you have to once you're aware of the adjacent possible, you start to get really, really curious about where it all leads, how big this mansion actually is. And, I have a suspicion that we'll never, ever, discover the final floor plan, like the total layout of this mansion, but the very exploration and the discovery makes it all worth it. And it's just really, really, really cool. And so it's like, we talked about like high activation emotions. If you're like, when you're thinking about the adjacent possible, it's really difficult to be bored or uninterested, because it's just so cool to think about. Anyway, I'm going to move on because it's time to wrap this up. And so next, I want to revisit something that I said earlier, and that is, the fact that there are no new problems. Like, any problem that you have or will ever have in your life, there is someone else somewhere out there who has that same problem or had that same problem. They've solved it, or learned something about that problem that can help you, and they've written about it in a book. So there's that, but not only that. Basically, anything that you want to learn, anything that you want to do or become, books and reading can help you do that, can help you become that. And so once you realize that the possibilities for your own personal expansion are near limitless, and that the best tools in order to sort of realize those possibilities are books that you can read right now, and sort of enter that first room. That is one of the switches that you have to turn. And once you understand that, your motivation is going to fly through the roof, and you're going to be so far ahead from people who just haven't realized the power of books and literature to do these things for people. So, I know I mentioned it, earlier in choosing what to read, but it's worth restating here. And another thing that's going to inspire you to read more books is that they contain the thoughts and ideas of, the smartest people ever to have lived anywhere. and it's just available, you know, wherever you want. I mean, you can pull out your phone in your pocket, and you have, you know, the most brilliant minds and thoughts ever to be put down on paper, or in ones and zeros, and you just have that available at any time. And just to have that power just on you at all times is just spectacular. And once you realize that, you're going to be so much further ahead. Another thing that's cool to consider is that because there has never been anyone exactly like you. I mean, you are a totally and fundamentally completely unique individual, that, like, irreplaceable. There's no one that has ever been like you or will ever be like you in the history of the universe, and ever. You know, like, you're it. Like, there's no one that will ever be better at being you than you are. And this is not Dr. Seuss. What I mean by this is that it's possible for you to have a thought that no one has ever had before, ever. A completely new thought that has never entered anyone else's head before in the history of the universe can enter yours. And to be able to create a new thought is another thing. It's so cool. And again, I hope I'm sort of transmitting this in the right way, but you have that power. So, you know, if anybody who reads, two books, the same book read by two different people is two different books, because they're taking their completely unique and individual life history and viewpoint and everything, and they're engaging with that book, bringing everything that they have and are to that reading experience, and they're creating thoughts and ideas that have never existed before, ever, in the history of creation. And that is true every time that you pick up a book, and I think that's really exciting to contemplate. That's just really cool to think about, and that's a power that you possess as well. So you have to see that opportunity. And the very last thing that I want to say, and this comes from one of my favorite books. It's 2,500 years old. It's called The Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu, and you've probably heard this before, like the phrase, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. That's from that book. Like, that's where it comes from, 2,500 years ago. And you thought it was a Nike commercial. But anyway, what I wanted to say here is that, like, a journey of 1,000 books starts with a single page. So, start now. Open that first book and just start on the very first page and see where it leads you. Enter that first room and see where you go. See where the floor plan leads you and where in that mansion you end up, and how many floors and rooms that mansion has, and like that inside your own mind. Like, how many rooms and undiscovered territories exist inside your own mind that you don't know are there yet, but you could discover when you start reading more books and just making reading a bigger part of your life. So again, thank you for sticking around this long. There is, of course, so much more that I could say. And again, if you want me to go deeper into any of these topics, leave a comment down below. And, I will definitely think about making a dedicated video on some of these topics, or most of these topics. I want to get to many of them eventually. But let me know what you're struggling with specifically and how I can help. Definitely sign up to get my email book recommendations. All the links are down in the description. I'm not going to run through them all again here. Just check it out, see what appeals to you, and what I have to offer you, and how I can help you. So ask me whatever questions you want in the comments. Train hard, read heavily, and I will see you in the next video. Cheers.